Can everybody still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of the members of the collaborative, the way that we came together was to get the stakeholders that had a say in building codes involved, and particularly in energy codes, and would have an effect on those. So that includes the Association of Idaho Cities, so you've got jurisdictions involved, the Idaho Division of Building Safety, the Association of Building Officials for the state, the major state utility, and the State Office of Energy Resources. We also have had a couple of individual organizations such as My Consulting Group and the Britt Makala Group, as well as the Integrated Design Labs through the university. And that's kind of the core collaborative that really steers the group. And this is the group that's funded. Now, if we take it beyond the core Energy Code Collaborative, that's where we have a larger group of stakeholders. And sometimes this core collaborative will expand and invite in and hold meetings that include a much larger group. And that's where we see, actual representatives from jurisdictions, multiple building officials. We have, the Builder and Contractors Association. We'll have the Association of Architects. AIA will be represented. And we've just expanded that to be as large a group as it needs to be. And there's a question about whether there was a term to service on this, and there really isn't. We've purposely been very loose about, if you're on the collaborative, you're invited to provide input, and we will open up the collaborative to anybody that's interested. So there is no set term, and it could be that our collaborative gets weighed a little heavily in one stakeholder's direction. And so far, we've been quite lucky that by making sure it's very open and that we're inclusive to anyone that wants to join the larger collaborative, that it's been successful and people feeling like there's an open forum. And I have to say that, we really have reached our goal that now if you go to an Idaho Building Code Board meeting, that Building Code Board says, well, has this been vetted by the collaborative if a question comes up? And there's nothing more that we wanted to hear than the actual Idaho Building Code Board returning it to us as the primary resource for vetting codes, for giving assessments of how good compliance is or whether the issues with compliance, and they make the recommendation to the Idaho legislature. So does that give enough background on, kind of how our collaborative is organized?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how you're funded, and that you have you have a paid sort of person that helps to organize it?
Yeah, we've been quite fortunate that the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance has put a budget towards the Energy Code effort in Idaho for a number of years. And Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, or NEA, is funded by the utilities around the region. And every year we get a budget. It's administered by the Association of Idaho Cities. And the people I originally mentioned that are part of that core collaborative, those core members are usually funded in some way or another to attend the meetings, to do cost analysis, to conduct the market research, and to provide education and training, as well as compliance outreach. One of the kind of key things that I'm not sure I really highlighted in the accomplishments, but part of our structure and has been for the last couple of years, is to have one dedicated staff member called a circuit rider. And that circuit rider is employed, well, I'll say they're a contractor to work 30 hours a week, so I shouldn't say they're an employee, to provide support across the state to work on energy code compliance. So any issues, any questions people have, any training requests that they have, then this is their key contact, and we're really working on outreach to make sure that people realize this person is available to them as a free service. And I'm just seeing a message come up that it's very echoey. So I don't know if there's anything I can do about that. Because I've taken it off speaker and I'm speaking directly in the phone. Is it still echoey, or is this better?
No, it sounds great. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Better.
Okay. But I'll just say the circuit rider, I think, is a really valuable thing if you can get funding to be able to make that kind of a position happen, because then that person's phone number, their face, their reputation, their email, they become the point of contact for people that are really struggling with any kind of code implementation or compliance. So I think that probably wraps up, plenty of how our collaborative is organized and how we're funded, and unless there's any other questions, should I just move on to the next?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Sharon. Maureen, you can advance the slide there.
Okay. When we were asked to do the accomplishments, I had a hard time narrowing it down to 3. So I have to admit I cheated a little bit and have 4. But, the first one is really just saying that we feel proud that the 2009 IECC was adopted here and that the 2012 IECC commercial has been adopted by the state. And really just what I stated earlier, that we're really, really proud to be in the position that we are considered the resource. And, if someone tries to take something to the legislature now around the collaborative, the first question asked is, was that vetted by the collaborative? What was the consensus of the collaborative? And what was the research that the collaborative conducted? So we feel like we've achieved that just by completely, being as objective as we can, focusing on that effort to be a resource, and also focusing a lot on doing concrete research and analysis that supports any questions that come up at a state level. And that kind of leads right into the first real accomplishment that I want to share is just the amount of research that we've done. And we started a couple of years ago with not funding through NEA, but the relationship with NEA and the establishment of the collaborative put us in a great position that the Bonneville Power Administration was willing to give us some money to do some market assessment. So we sent emails out to the State Association of Building Officials. We sent through AIA. We also sent to the Association of Idaho Cities and Counties to make sure that we had elected officials included. And we asked them a lot of questions about energy codes. I can't say that this was a properly done, statistically valid survey. It was a very inexpensive survey that we did internally within the collaborative. And some of the results that we got were really telling. And we found that, one of them in particular was that we asked about how much people believed that it was important that Idaho codes are consistent with whatever the national standard is. We found 90% of building officials thought it was moderately or highly important. 84% of architects agreed, and 75% of homeowners and 78% of elected officials. So we saw really high numbers there that told us that we wanted to do additional research. We also saw some really surprising numbers in that small survey that we did to homeowners. And the way we reached homeowners in that initial low budget approach was to send out emails through the neighborhood associations. So any neighborhood associations that were in agreement that we could send a survey request to their members, they would forward it on to their neighborhood association members, and then we would take however many responses we got. So statistically valid, no. So it was only a small sampling, but it told us that homeowners were willing to pay a lot more than anybody was guessing. So we went back to the Bonneville Power Administration and said we would like more funding to really do a study of homeowners. And so we got a significantly higher jump in our budget. We were able to enlist Boise State University to give it the academic credence. We were able to employ Northwest Research Group to make sure everything was done to ISO market research standards. And we conducted in-depth analysis of what the state of Idaho thought about energy codes. And we found out that 65% of Idahoans support energy codes. And we found out the top drivers for supporting energy codes. We found out what they agreed and disagreed with, how much they were willing to pay. And, this is now results that we're sharing at the Idaho Building Code Board level, and that we intend to share with the legislature this winter. We're still working on getting the dates. We'll probably have to very last minute, but we feel it's really important to share that there's so much support for energy codes and, why people believe in it. And one of the largest percentage of agreements that we saw was that an energy efficient home has a higher resale value. So we found some of that interesting. And we've taken what we learned in the surveys and gone a step further and decided to get a logo and branding for our collaborative and really work on getting the word out that this collaborative is established, it's to be respected, it's here to stay. And it may seem simple to throw together a logo, but it was important to us as a group to feel like we had more of an identity, and that when we produced research or we produced analysis, we could share it at a state level or with the legislature, and it would be branded with our collaborative. So that was a step that we did to really take us to another level. And then we've been taking the research that we did, and we decided that with a pretty limited budget, I mean, it's great that we get funding, but we don't get funding to do massive consumer marketing. And, that's just a whole nother level. So what I ended up doing was approaching one of the largest utilities and saying, what about if we partner? You've got a freestanding insert that goes into 225,000 newspapers. What about if we start getting the message of energy codes into that? And at the very start, just tell people, all you have to do is start thinking about, does your home now compared to a new home that's going to be built? Does your home have 50% high energy, high efficiency lighting? If it doesn't, then you don't compare to the home down the block that's new, and you might want to think about that in terms of the value. So we're really working on some combined outreach and utilizing the utilities budget and the outreach they're already doing at events and in promotional materials, and trying to piggyback on that and just get more and more messaging that people should be aware that there is a base code, and they should be able to compare the energy efficiency of their home to whatever a new code-built home is and have more knowledge about that. So I think that hopefully summarizes the accomplishments enough, and I'll try to quickly go through the next two slides. 3 needs to improve our chances for success. I think we really need better outreach. We have the full 2012 IUCC being adopted, but there's been huge builder opposition on the residential side. And so I think there needs to be more and more outreach about certain elements of that code that are going to be beneficial to homeowners, as well as the research we have showing that homeowners support it, and they're willing to pay for it, and they're willing to accept a payback period of up to 7 years. Greater participation from builders in training. We offer a lot of trainings, and our biggest challenge is trying to get builders there. And we try to go to them, and I have to say we're still struggling on how to be successful in that arena. Hoping by attending the latest state Building and Contractors Association planning session and getting them to put us on, get a training on their agenda for when they have their statewide meeting is going to hopefully be a step in the right direction to keep getting our foot more in the door with builders. But I have to admit, we've still struggled with that. And the state as a whole is still struggling with the blower door testing requirement of the 2012 IECC specifically. And so I think we really have to ramp up the equipment availability, the training we're doing to make sure people are educated on how to do air sealing and how to do a blower door test, as well as outreach to homeowners so that they understand the benefits from their perspective. So that's likely going to be an area that our collaborative research and outreach that we do with utilities is, hopefully going to focus on, is really appreciating the air sealing and what a blower door is. And the next one. And I think the biggest lesson learned was how powerful it is to turn around and show people research. And not just cost analysis and research on a national scale, but do the legwork to get some real cost analysis done in local markets so you can share that. And just the value of having statistically respected market research that we can say, here's what homeowners really think. And it really went against all the rumors that were flying around when people would say, oh, they're not willing to pay $500 more. Oh, they're not willing to pay this per month, and they're not willing to accept a payback of more than a couple of years. Well, our research showed it was, Idahoans will respect a payback of up to 7 years. So I think having the research has made a huge difference to boost our level of respect at a state level and what we can accomplish.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Sharon. Kamaria, are there any questions that were typed in?
No, everything that's been asked so far I've been addressing.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to Nebraska then. So Danielle Jensen.
Actually, Maria, sorry. Maria?
Yep.
Oh, Sherry Shapiro asked if she could present earlier.
Yeah. Yep, let's go ahead and have Nebraska go now. I think, Sherry, you have to leave at 3:15. Is that right?
Sherry, can you unmute yourself?
*6 will unmute you, Sherry. Well, let's go ahead and have Danielle go now, and then we'll have Sherry go next before Lauren.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Yep. Is
Okay,
that
cool.
Danielle?
I wanted to, yep, I wanted to make, I tried *6. I want to make sure it worked. As Maria mentioned, I'm Danielle Jensen. I'm with the Nebraska Energy Office. I'm the Public and Legislative Liaison, and I work with our Codes Compliance Collaborative here. Just some quick background, our collaborative will be going into our 3rd year next year. Before that, we had done some intensive trainings, had done a residential baseline study on compliance, and had also hired a retired code official to go around to jurisdictions and work with them on issues that we found through our compliance baseline study. Not long after that, Maria and Paul from BCAP came to us and asked if we wanted to start a collaborative. And so with their help, we got it open. We started with a small group of about 8 to 10 people who made recommendations on whom to invite and include on this collaborative. We came up with a list of about 75 different people to contact, or sent out invitations to those 75 to join the collaborative. Some of the people on the initial group are on the collaborative, but not all of them are. Some of them just wanted to be in the initial stages of finding the right stakeholders to be on the collaborative. Our membership is open. We have representatives from utilities, we have home builders, architects, general contractors, advocacy groups such as the League of Municipalities, home builder associations. We also have HVAC people, HERS raters, we have code officials, policymakers, and also suppliers. Some of our supplier reps have a couple of seats on the collaborative. And we also have some educators. We have a professor from UNL and some instructors from University of Nebraska Kearney. As I said, it's open, so we don't have any set terms for these organizations or any of the stakeholder groups that are represented. We just invite them, and in fact, I think I've pared my list down to 62 names on our list that we invite to every meeting that we have, which is 4 meetings a year. We generally have about 20 to 25 that show up to the meetings and another 5 that call in, including Eric Makala from Idaho. He helps us with that, so he calls into our group. As far as leading the collaborative, myself, I provide the administrative support, and then along with Chris Burgess from MIA, we felt that it would be good to have an outside group help lead the collaborative to make it seem more impartial, that it wasn't just a state government mandated or state government group that was trying to steer a direction in this. We have a 3rd spot that's open in that leading of the collaborative. We call it a triumvirate. I can never say the word right. That's what we jokingly call ourselves. And what we've decided to do with that 3rd seat is have it be rotating among our members. We'll ask a member to serve a 1-year term, and what that involves is we have a phone call every other week, and we discuss ideas or tasks that the collaborative is working on, and any other issues that might deal with the administration of the collaborative. Within our collaborative, we have 4 standing committees. One committee is securing funding. Then we have a training and outreach committee. That's a combined committee. Our 3rd committee is state and local policy, and the 4th committee is compliance and measurement. Each of those committees usually meet about once a month via phone call, just have a committee conference call. And then the committee chairs, we try to have them have a committee conference call with the triumvirate, or the 3 of us. I'll just call the 3 of us co-chairs, in between the meetings so that we can get updates from them on their committees. I have noted on here that we also have a special committee, and that is what I'm calling the University of Nebraska Lincoln Education Committee. I'll talk more about how that came about later when I talk about our accomplishments, but this committee will be looking at ideas about how to introduce code education to university students in architecture and construction management. Next slide. Our funding is all volunteer. Just as a side note, Nebraska is the only 100% public power state in the country. We do not have an EAPS, so there's no mandated funding coming to us from any of the utilities. Our agency gets under $300,000 a year from the state legislature. So whatever money we do get is either from DOE formula grants or any competitive grants that we can find. My time is allocated towards state energy program funding that we get, usually in our code section. And also if we find any special projects. Previously we had a bunch of money left over from SCP that we were able to dedicate to the collaborative last year for our special projects that we wanted to get done. We are applying for an in-state grant, the Nebraska Environmental Trust Grant, for some projects that the collaborative wants to do, including extended training beyond what we've already done, also testing some third-party enforcement practices, and doing some homeowner education. We won't know until after the first of the year if we got that grant. We're hoping that we can. We are working on how to get utility funding. As I said, we are a non-EAPS state, so we're trying to look at ways that we can get the utilities perhaps to get some money involved. And that's not just our electric utilities. We're also looking at our natural gas utilities to see how they can also pony up and help us out. Next slide. 3 of our accomplishments for last year, for this year, 2014. Since all of our codes are adopted by our legislature, and I think we're the only state that also does that, or we're pretty unique in that, we realize the state senators need to understand the importance of energy codes and what it means, and when they're passing it, what it means. So we developed what we call our Energy Codes 101, and we delivered that to our Urban Affairs Committee this past spring. That's the committee that codes go through. It is a small committee. There's only, I believe, 7 or 9 members. So we had 4 of them there the entire time, with one of them furiously taking notes at a very fast speed, and the others kind of rotated in and out. We thought that it was very beneficial because it prompted one of our state senators to ask us about the code structure and the fact that although they passed the energy code, a local municipality does not actually have to enforce it if they don't include an energy code in their city ordinances. So I spent my summer compiling a list of all the jurisdictions between our office, the fire marshal, state electrical board, and putting together what codes they have or don't have in place. I think that that'll be beneficial to us going forward to maybe getting that loophole closed in the law. So that was a good thing to present to them. We've also been asked to present again next session, which starts in January, because we have a bunch of new senators coming in, so we'll be presenting that to them as well. We also modified our Energy Codes 101 presentation and delivered it to the League of Municipalities at their yearly conference. It was very interesting. Most of the people that came to hear our presentation were representing municipalities that have very, very, very low construction permits. In fact, many of them were in counties that have a 0 average of construction permits for 10 years. But they were able to learn what the Energy Office provides for those areas. Obviously, an area like that is not going to have a code official. Our agency provides free plan reviews, res checks, com checks, etc., free advice, even technical advice to somebody building in those areas if they need it. Our second accomplishment this year was a commercial code compliance study. We, to be quite frank, wanted to look for a cheap way to do a commercial code compliance study. We partnered with Britt Mackler Group to do the data evaluation and had an idea to use university students to collect the data. Well, the Compliance Collaborative had a group, the Compliance Measurement Group. They hooked up with a professor from UNL, and he thought it should be done as a service learning project. So what we did was some students signed up to take the class. Britt Mackler Group came out and did about a 2.5-day cram session on energy codes, taught them how to go into the buildings, what to look for. They even sent someone who works for them to come and help on some of the buildings when they would do the data collection. The students took a lot of pictures. If they weren't sure if it met code or not. If they were looking at something and weren't sure if it met code, they would take pictures and send it to Britt Makela to have them determine. The best thing, I think the most important thing that came out of that study, besides the fact that Nebraska has about an 83% compliance rate, was the value to these UNL students. That education they received in that semester is priceless. We realize that students in the universities, the community colleges, they aren't really getting any education about codes. None of the codes, not even just energy codes. So the first time they interact with that is on the job. And so we realized if we start with them early, perhaps that's going to help later on as you go down the road, that someone's going to put more of an importance on following codes. So that is where our special committee has come about. We have the professor from UNL and several other people on our collaborative are going to be working together to see what they can come up with to offer at the university. Our third accomplishment, it's a partial accomplishment. I've talked about how we're trying to find more funding from utilities. Our utilities are more interested in peak demand, reducing that. In the summer, we are number one in most irrigated acres in the country. Our state is. So while you have your irrigation going on, you have all the air conditioners running. So our rural electrics are looking at how can we reduce it during that time. So we've kind of figured out how to do it. We've been working out with PNNL, but now we just haven't done it yet. So that'll be our next thing to work on next year. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, I'm frozen.
I think she's...
Okay.
Maureen, are you advancing the slide there? There we go.
Anyway. 3 needs to improve our chances for success. We have a meeting coming up in a couple weeks at our December meeting. We're going to define our goals for 2015. We're going to talk about, obviously, that peak demand stuff and also how we continue to educate people about the importance of energy codes. You know, where else can we do Energy Codes 101? Continuous outreach. One of the big things that we need to keep doing is training. We actually get a very good attendance rate at our training sessions. Unfortunately, since we've been out of money, we haven't done any training since June. I think once you have a pause in training, you lose touch with those groups, and they start to maybe forget about that collaborative that you're the leading resource on codes, say with the Energy Office. So we've got to try and find some funding to continue that. And also information out to our stakeholders. One thing that we have talked about is monthly articles that would go to our different stakeholder groups that are represented that talk about energy codes, the importance of them, and it would possibly be published in maybe their monthly newsletter or their monthly email. Third, a constant evaluation of membership. Like I said, I reduced it from 75 to 61 or 62 people that I invite. I just keep looking at attendance, seeing who does or doesn't respond back, and either contacting that organization to say, hey, would you like somebody else, or just even finding another organization to fill the constant evaluation of that. Next slide.
Next slide, Maureen.
I think I can pull mine up.
Sorry guys, I'm trying to forward them, and it's not working. So just keep talking, Danielle, and I'll keep trying to get the slide forwarded.
Okay. The next thing was the one lesson learned, and I had keep focused. We had a problem in the beginning of our collaborative. We had a group of builders who really wanted to use this group to push high-performance homes, and that's not the purpose of our collaborative. Our collaborative is to improve compliance rates. Our residential rate when we first did our study was 67%. We did a small follow-up survey. I think it's up to 73%, so we need to keep focusing on that. And in order to keep focused, we need to maintain the communication with our committee chairs. Had a period for a while where we were not staying in touch with them as often as we should, which led to more frequent conference calls with them. And like I said, just staying on point with our mission and our goals instead of letting special interest groups within our collaborative try and veer us off. So, and that's all I've got. I did see a question. Should I go ahead and answer it if I see it, Maria?
Sure. Go ahead.
Sherry Shapiro asked, how did Nebraska get utilities engaged, not as far as dollars, but just interest in showing up? Since we have a unique structure here in Nebraska with public power, they actually are very supportive of energy efficiency projects. We have developed a really good working relationship with the public power utilities in the last, I would say, 4 years. Our director made it a priority for us to get involved with them. So not only are they involved on our Codes Compliance Collaborative, but we also have a group where it's our agency and the 3 leading generation facilities, which is Nebraska Public Power, Omaha Public Power, and Lincoln Electric System. By engaging with those 3 in this outside group, it helped us when we formed our collaborative to come to them and say, hey, you know, energy codes are shown to be this efficient, and so they were able to be involved without spending a lot of money because obviously public powers don't have a lot of that extra money to spend. Whatever money they do have is reinvested in facilities or expansion of renewables or cleaner forms of energy. So I think it's just really the way that our state is set up that we are able to do that.
Okay. Thanks so much, Danielle. We're going to move on to and Maureen, this is going to require your assistance here. Instead of going to Colorado, let's go on to Pennsylvania because Sherry has to leave early. So hers is the second to the last. There we go. Okay. All right, Sherry, if you haven't already, please unmute your phone with *6.
I did.
Great. Okay, take it away. Thanks so much, Sherry.
No problem. Thanks, everybody. This is very helpful, and thanks to BCAP for organizing this. It's really nice to hear, you know, the challenges and the opportunities that the collaborative represent. So I got involved in this. I run a company called Calliope Communications, and we do policy and communications consulting around energy, environment, and building codes. And so I got engaged with this with Maureen at the end of 2013, so about a year ago. And Pennsylvania has been having a very challenging time updating its building code. So it seems like a very good place for a compliance collaborative with the idea that we're on the 2009 code. If we can improve compliance with 2009 code, we'll improve energy efficiency, and we see that for adoption, sort of at the door. So one of our 3 accomplishments was simply setting up the collaborative itself and starting to get that mailing list put together and get some interest and engagement with it, have a number of meetings and really pull it together in terms of mission and goal. And then after our first couple meetings, we were able to secure funding from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection and from their energy office. And they've been very engaged with it. And then at the last meeting, we selected 2 projects, a sort of shorter-term project, which is to do builder, owner, design professional training around energy codes. And the longer-term project is to increase utility engagement and to have energy codes become part of our utility-funded energy efficiency program. So we wanted a shorter-term goal and project that we could get some traction with, and a longer-term one that would have a long-term, large-scale impact. There are 3 things that we need to do, as I see it, to improve our chances for success. We have some very dedicated people who keep coming to meetings and add a lot of value. We have people who sort of rotate in and out, but we need to engage some additional stakeholders, particularly from the builder community, realtors, insurance, more of those groups that I would say are not naturally affiliated with energy code related activities. And there needs to be more one-on-one outreach, which is very time consuming and as a result very expensive. It's just a matter of having the resources dedicated to, as someone has already said, during doing the personal outreach to the organizations, having them do the personal outreach to their members and so forth. And attached to that is increasing the meeting attendance. We usually have about 10 to 15 people at our meetings, and so we'd like to push that up into the 20 person area. And contractor participation, we just need the home builders to show up, even if they don't love the message. They need to be engaged so that we incorporate. Can you hear me?
Sherry, I think we're having a little bit of trouble with your phone. It's beeping and you're cutting out occasionally.
Oh,
I don't know if there's anything you can do to change
I don't know.
that.
Let me see if I can. Did that help?
I don't know. Why don't you keep going? I think it'll work itself out maybe.
So the third thing is to get contractor participation. You really feel like we need their participation and input, and so any way that the other collaboratives have of messaging it in a way that makes them want to participate would be helpful. The needs to improve our chances for success are the same as our challenges, really. And our two lessons learned are one-on-one invitations are important, right? We really need to have our stakeholders reach out to their contacts in other organizations, and momentum is important. We think that having a short-term project that we can get some traction on will increase our chances for success.
Great. Thank you, Sherry. I think you did a good job staying on track as far as the timing goes, too. So I think we're right on time here. Are there any questions that came in, Kamaria, for Sherry?
No, there were no questions for her. I have one question, but that's better suited for the Q&A at the end.
Great. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to Colorado then. So, Maureen, if you could get us back. Thank you. And Lauren Smith with SWEEP is going to take us away here. So go ahead, Lauren. Oh, Lauren, I think you have to hit *6 to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yep. Hi everyone. I'm Lauren Smith, and I'm a program associate in the Buildings Efficiency Program at SWEEP in Colorado. And SWEEP's role is we really just help facilitate the collaborative in Colorado. I kind of organize the meetings and all the agendas and minutes. But we also have a leadership team, and that consists of myself, Jim Myers from SWEEP, Peter Resson from the Energy Office, Rick Hanger from Department of Local Affairs, and Shauna Mozingo from Colorado Code Consulting. But I listed 3 of our accomplishments over the past year, and one of them was we developed and implemented energy code trainings across the state with assistance from the Colorado Energy Office. And these were commercial and residential trainings and in-person and webinar formats. We got some really good feedback from the trainings, and I'll summarize some of that in the last slide. And number 2 is we had several local adoptions. Colorado is a home rule state, so it really varies by jurisdiction. And we did have lots of adoptions of the 2012 IECC in the last year. Some of the more recent ones were Breckenridge, Broomfield, and Mountain Village. And we are looking forward to, there are a few jurisdictions looking at the 2015 IECC. Denver is planning to adopt in early 2015. And also after that, at some point, I think Boulder County and Aurora will be looking at it too. And the last accomplishment I put on here, we did complete an application for DOE funding to do a residential compliance study in the state. We had several partners. They're listed on the slide here. But I think we had a really good application, but we were not awarded funding. However, we are currently developing a small study on commercial compliance in the state in partnership with CO. So we are still planning to look at that issue on the commercial side, and we want to look at commercial specifically because we think the residential rates are pretty high. Next slide. Okay, so I kind of cheated too, and there's really 4 kind of needs here. But there are 3 main ones, and the first one is just funding. Like I said, we have a leadership team in Colorado, and that's been going pretty well. But it would definitely be helpful to have funding for someone to facilitate the collaborative, to focus on it in a more involved capacity, and then also, funding for strategic studies and other efforts that we're looking at, like the compliance evaluation. The next one is establish methodology for assessing energy code compliance, and then also simplified energy code checklists. And what I mean by that is just, I think that DOE, I'm not sure where they're at with the evaluation methodology for residential and commercial compliance. I know they are funding several parties to do the residential evaluations now, so that one might be further along. But it would be helpful for us to have, some kind of standardized methodology that's also simplified, because we, I think in the past, had looked at score and store checklists, but they're pretty lengthy. So maybe something a bit more simplified would be helpful. And the last one I put is assistance from professional associations in promoting education to their membership. And we were just thinking people like AIA, AGC, different professional associations. We could definitely use some more support there in promoting our energy code trainings. And we also wanted to note that another kind of challenge we have in being a home rule state is how to improve compliance with different versions of the code going on at once. So, we've been promoting in the past the 2009 IECC, and now the 2012 and the 2015. And especially now that the 2015 code has the HERS pathway, it's something we'll need to address in how we're going to look at compliance in looking at all those different codes and what we want to promote. Okay, next slide. Okay, so for lessons learned, I kind of just put a list of findings from our last training program. And this came from our last collaborative meeting where Shauna Mozingo, who administered a lot or all of these trainings, kind of summarized her findings. But these are training specific. And what we found is that in Colorado at least, the timing of trainings is important. So not hosting them between May and September is probably beneficial because it's warmer from May to September, so there's more construction going on, and the building departments are busier, so obviously scheduling is a consideration. We found that the webinars were really successful. We had high attendance and lots of interest in the webinars. Continue to do those. And we found that a lot of the rural communities, they often don't have a competitive HERS and manual J market, so that's something we'll need to work on. And the last thing is that we found is that there was some confusion about the 2012 versus the 2015 IECC still ongoing. So that's something we're going to try to address also. But yeah, that's all I had for now, unless anyone has questions.
Okay, thanks so much, Lauren. Were there any questions for Colorado? Kamaria?
There are no questions for.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next slide. This is Delaware, and Crystal, I won't pronounce her last name right, Nagiski, I think. with the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Conservation. She emailed me just before this meeting and said she couldn't make it. So so I'll just read through her slides quickly here. Okay, so Delaware, there are 3 accomplishments. They worked together to adopt the 2012 IECC and ASHRAE 90.1, provided coordinated trainings on updated codes and required new building tests, and the third one is developed the 2012 Delaware Energy Code FAQs, which is a really great resource that I think will maybe be helpful for all of you, because it'll kind of give you maybe a starting place for developing frequently asked questions of your own in your own states. It's a really nice piece that they're still working on and going back and forth within their collaborative. But anyway, that might be another forthcoming resource. We can move on here, Maureen. And their needs are similar to others: additional training, jurisdictional involvement, and more training. And we can go on to the next one. And communication is the key, which we've heard from other collaboratives so far today. So sorry I didn't give that, I'm sure, as well as Crystal would have. But we'll move on to Minnesota and Allison Lindberg with Fresh Energy. So Allison, if you have not yet hit *6, go ahead and do that, and you can take it away.
Great. Hi, everyone. I hope that you can hear me. So, yes, this is Allison Lindberg. I'm with Fresh Energy. We're a nonprofit organization, and we work on public policy around clean energy and energy efficiency in Minnesota. And for the past 3 years, we've been working on energy code adoption here. And we have finally, since August, we adopted our new energy code, which is the IECC 2012. That will go into effect February 14th of 2015. And the commercial code is in the process of being adopted, and with a potential start date of 1 month later from that. So in terms of code compliance, we are kind of the baby to this group. We just got started, although there had been some meetings here with a number of people in the field that were concerned about the code and how it was going to be met and what the compliance rates might be. So I would say since about March or April of 2014, we've been having some kind of smaller group meetings with some of the people that were interested in potentially seeing if forming a collaborative made sense for Minnesota. And so we started reaching out to key stakeholders, and we had our first meeting in mid-October of this year, and we had over 20 participants, so that was one of our big accomplishments. You'll notice all of our accomplishments are pretty small compared to what a lot of you guys are already doing, but I'll stick with it. We had a lot of people that were more interested, but that couldn't just make the meetings, so most of them were residential that actually attended. And one of the things that we did was we took some time to brainstorm what the key barriers and opportunities were about energy code compliance in Minnesota. And as I mentioned, they were mainly residential. And just to name a couple, one of the big ones we found out is lack of actual access, like physical access to seeing what the new code changes are. That won't come out until the codes are officially in force, which will be February 14th or mid-March. That's been making training really difficult. We've had a lot of great compliance strategies happening here and a lot of trainings, but the way that they're being interpreted is completely different across the different people that are training. So there's a lot of good intentions out there, but we were discovering from this meeting that not everybody was interpreting the code the same way. So very much still in the preliminary stages there, but we identified what some of those barriers are. And our main goal of that meeting was to decide, do we need to form a collaborative? And thankfully, yes, we had decided that our main 2 departments that work on the energy codes, which is the Department of Labor and Industry, who adopts and enforces the code, they said yes, and so did our Department of Commerce Division of Energy Resources. So we have our next meeting in December 2014, and you can go to the next slide. So the 3 needs that we need to keep improving would be the complete buy-in from those 2 state agencies that I just mentioned. And I would say it was really great and interesting to hear, I believe it was Idaho that had said that they have now established themselves as the go-to for asking questions. Has this been vetted through the collaborative? And I think that we would hope for something similar here. Financing and funding, it seems like, is a reoccurring theme amongst the collaboratives. We do have some funding specifically for Fresh Energy to work on this, but for how long, we don't know. And I would also say that financing and funding of additional compliance strategies is also a concern. And then we learned that, of course, we didn't have all stakeholders at the table that need to be there. So engaging people such as BCAP and even more commercial stakeholders, we will make sure that that happens. And going on to the next slide, please. And then lesson learned. Like I said, it's really too early to tell, but I really appreciate all of you sharing your information with us, because this has already been very enlightening just from hearing, the states that have already gone today. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much, Allison. And do we have any questions for Allison, Kamaria?
Jim Myers asked if someone can send him the link to the Delaware frequently asked questions.
Oh, it's not live yet, Jim. It's just going back and forth between the collaborative members right now as they're working out. They're refining it, so it's not quite ready to share. But yes, once it's there, we'll share it with you.
All right.
Okay.
That was all.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Allison, for presenting. Even though you've only had one meeting, that's great. We're excited that you're there and working on that. And we'll move on to Nevada is up next. So Jim Myers, you can go ahead.
Hello, this is Jim Myers with Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. I work on the buildings program team with Lauren at SWEEP, and I'm part of the collaborative in Nevada. The Nevada Collaborative's been in operation about 3 years now, and it was one of the first behind Idaho. And we have a leadership team from the Nevada Governor's Office of Energy, Kevin Hill and Dina Contrario. Dina, who's on the call. Brenda Thompson from Clark County. We have a BPI and HERS provider and trainer who's part of the leadership team. We have an architect who is very active in this area, and she was the past USGBC chapter president in the leadership team. So on our collaborative accomplishments, we worked as a collaborative with the Britt Makela team to put together a response to the DOE funding opportunity announcement for residential code compliance. And we had matching funds from within the states. We had the utilities participating. Unfortunately, we weren't selected, but it was a good working opportunity for the team. We gain new participants slowly. We had the largest group of participation when the collaborative was formed, and we've had individuals leave and individuals join. We've had some say it doesn't really fit. We've had the appraisal industry participating early on. They're not participating at this time, but they are continuing to have the emails and are appreciative of having the minutes and so forth. So we have gained some participants in our collaborative. Those would be code ambassadors we've had that have been very busy as construction's picked up in Nevada, so they've come back. Some individuals that are participating in the ASHRAE standards development, and we've had some of those that have joined the collaborative. The other third item for our accomplishments, we worked, the state adopted the 2012 IECC earlier this year. It becomes effective July of next year, of 2015. And so we had collaborative members participating in the regional meetings that were held throughout the state. And so we had some that were supportive of the Energy Code and some that were hesitant. And we also have the Home Builders Associations participating in the collaborative, so we had some participation and some hesitation. That's a good way to put it, from the 2012 IECC adoption. And Nevada is a state that adopts at the state level. There's not a mechanism to require local municipalities to adopt at the local level. So it sounds similar to Nebraska from what I just heard. And so, but we do have two communities that have adopted the 2012 already and are now enforcing, and that's Clark County, which is where Las Vegas is located, and the municipality city of Henderson. Those two communities and their construction activity make up about 48% of the construction activity in the state. So we're about halfway there with two municipalities have adopted the 2012. Next slide. This is the 3 needs to improve chances for success. And it's a theme I've heard is funding. And so there hasn't been any formal funding that's come to support the collaborative. There has been some funding that's come from utilities to support some Energy Code training needs. And there was initial funding from BCAP to get the program off and moving and to provide some travel. In Nevada, it's the demographics. It's not like a smaller state or where municipalities are fairly close between the two largest regions, Reno, Las Vegas. That's an airline flight to make the drive is 8+ hours. And then there's the rural parts of the state. So funding is one, and in areas where we could use funding as administrative support. That's driving and having those one-on-one personal meetings, local meetings, meeting with industries, meeting with wholesalers, distributors. I heard another state talk about getting the distributors involved, and then also funding of strategic studies and compliance evaluations. There was a compliance evaluation performed back under ARA funding by Clark County, but that's the only level of funding for compliance. So those are areas that we continue to talk about receiving funding for strategic studies, which would be focused on a building type or a specific region to get a picture of Energy Code compliance. The other is champions willing to commit time. When I say champions, they don't have to be a building code ambassador, which we do have in the state of Nevada. They're a champion that believes in best practices, Energy Code compliance, and what we're finding in Nevada as the economy has turned, all of the industry, the designers, through the building officials to the trades, they're all extremely busy, and especially on the building official side, there's been minimal hiring to offset all the cutbacks, the layoffs that occurred during the housing and construction recession. So that we still see. People are interested. They just don't have the time to commit because they're already working overtime with their day jobs. So we're working on that, and hopefully as things continue to improve, that municipalities and the businesses and organizations will start to hire and open up, which will open up opportunities for people to spend some time participating in these. We also have had some attrition. We had one of our champions who retired and he was a code ambassador. He was a champion on energy codes, and so he's retired, and he's turned over the torch to a younger generation. We just haven't had a younger generation to come in and take his zeal and interest in energy code compliance forward. So, and then lastly on improvement is we want to continue to gain new members to offset the attrition and participation levels. And then the last slide on lessons learned. Okay, it was said in our needs. It takes time and effort to maintain a functioning and valuable state collaborative, and so we have been at it for 3 years, and we see areas and we see needs, and we just continue to move forward, and with the idea that we're going to be able to lock into some funding somewhere. The utilities have minimal funding as they have cut back in efficiency programs, and also the largest utility, NV Energy, was recently purchased by Berkshire Hathaway, and so there's been some areas of cutback there. But we've had some recent training and some trainings throughout this year provided by the NV Energy, the largest utility in the state. So. That's our lessons learned. I think that's a lessons learned we've had for for every quarter, but it's a good one, and I appreciate all the other lessons learned and all the things that I've heard today.
Okay, thanks so much, Jim. Do we have any questions, Kamaria?
No, we don't have any questions at this point.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to the final state then. Oh, sorry. Nope. It's the second to the final one. So New Hampshire. Autumn Kurilla, if you could hit *6 to unmute your phone, and you can go right ahead. Maybe you should hit *6 again. Maybe you muted yourself. Okay. Are you there? Autumn, we can't hear you if you're speaking.
How about now?
Yes, there you are.
Okay. Thank you. Just having some confusion on this end of the phone.
Okay, sorry.
I just wanted to say thank you for hosting this All Codes Collaborative. I know I always find them very interesting, and it's great to see what all the other collaboratives are doing and sort of where we're headed and what sort of support we all could use. So for the state of New Hampshire, we've had a pretty interesting year, I would say. So we sort of started our year by reviewing some recommendations of the New Hampshire Energy Code Roadmap, which was a document developed previously under a Building Codes project under ARRA funding, which our office here at GDS Associates, along with the New Hampshire Office of Energy and Planning, sort of developed to make a guide to help the state comply with the 2009 Energy Code. So what we found and sort of decided upon as a collaborative was that we needed to set a priority and a focus on outreach and education. And so I think I get into a bit more on what we're doing currently. Another one of our accomplishments was sort of that we won some DOE funding, and we're going to be launching a pilot program with Vermont. That funding was, I think, from FOA 1073, and it was sort of an open-ended funding opportunity, and I think the title is Opportunities for Innovative Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Practices. And so this was submitted upon by the Vermont DPS, VEIC, and then on the New Hampshire side, the New Hampshire Office of Energy and Planning, and my company, GDS Associates. And we'll be doing sort of a building energy labeling pilot along with Vermont, who's actually quite far along in that process already. So this funding will help the state of New Hampshire and the collaborative as well to sort of forward some of the work that we've already accomplished on building energy labeling. So sort of relating back to the first accomplishment, we set a short-term goal focused on exploring building energy labeling. So in the past, we've sort of dealt with different topics throughout the years, or throughout the year, but we sort of decided, I guess early on this year, that we wanted to do something more specific and short term and sort of target our attention and our limited resources to see what we could accomplish. And so we've had some really good support through a sort of subcommittee on the collaborative, and they've done a really good job examining a bunch of different building energy labeling programs that are occurring throughout the country, including the DOE Home Score, I believe, and then also looking specifically at the Vermont approach and a few other approaches as well. Could I have the next slide, please? So our 3 needs for improving our chances for success. I have up there the IECC 2015. So currently our state adopts the new codes. It's a bit confusing. The last round of code adoptions for the IECC 2009 were reviewed and adopted by the state's Building Code Review Board. And then in a sort of subsequent legislative session, they believed that their power had been sort of stripped away, and now it's sort of current thought that the legislature is the only body that can adopt new codes. However, the Building Code Review Board is reviewing the 2015 code, and we're awaiting a ruling by the state's Attorney General on the sort of rights and privileges of the Building Code Review Board. They might be allowed to adopt new code, which sort of changes the picture here in New Hampshire. So we're awaiting that. Another need would be sort of continued leadership and member commitment. We've had some really good participation over the last year, I think especially with this focus on building labeling. We've had quite a few members at all of our meetings. Typically we have about, I think, 10 to 15 folks attending our bi-monthly meetings. But we would definitely like to re-engage some of the stakeholders that we sort of have lost along the way. For one, we'd really like to get realtors and appraisers sort of more involved again. They're definitely a challenging group to get to commit to a bi-monthly meeting and sort of ongoing engagement. And then thirdly, any more funding would also be excellent. We do have this DOE grant, which will help support the collaborative somewhat. And we are also partnering with the utilities in our state, and they've definitely offered up their time. We have had a couple of utility representatives on our collaborative over the last few years. And they've always been very supportive of general energy efficiency and code compliance in the past. We've been able to do some building code training sessions on commercial and residential building code compliance through funding that they've provided. So continuation of that would be very helpful. And could I have the last slide, please? Thank you. So for lessons learned, I think we've really learned that this year refining our focus has been very helpful in sort of directing our activities and meetings over the last few months. It's helped given us some direction and sort of we've been able to accomplish, I think, more than had we not sort of defined our focus. But we'll definitely be looking forward to the next year with some of this DOE funding and continuing to partner with Vermont, and we'll see where we end up. Yep, I think that's the last slide.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Autumn. Do we have any questions for Autumn Kamaria?
No questions for this section.
Okay, so we'll move on to our last collaborative presenter, Chris Herbert, with the Southwest Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a Resource. Chris, are you there?
Yeah, I think I am.
Oh, you are.
Can you hear me?
Good. Yes.
Good. Okay. Well, last but not least, right?
Right.
Texas has been doing a collaborative effort since 2011, early on tried to organize, and we owe much of our success to SECO, our state energy office, for their support and helping us to wrangle all the right people together to keep this going, and for financial support as well. We also do not have any utility funding to support any of these activities at this time. So anyway, I'll get into some of the accomplishments that we've achieved this year. We published a baseline report on statewide energy code adoption. And I want to be clear that that's not a compliance study, and reported some progress in our first year in our research and in our outreach. In Texas, it's a home rule state, so we have, while the state adopts a code, all the local jurisdictions are required to then adopt it locally and enforce it locally. So it's interesting how that affects the outcomes of codes in a state, but I'll get into that a little bit more. What we were able to report is the progress. We had about 46% of the jurisdictions we looked at, bigger jurisdictions in the state, and 46%, or almost half of them, had not yet adopted the statewide code, which was 2 years in implementation. And this year we were able to report that down to 24% of those same cities. So we are definitely making an impact, so that's great. We also have established the largest Energy Code Ambassador program. We currently have 13, and next week we will be providing training for another 13 or maybe 14 more. So we'll have 25 or 26 certified in Texas and Oklahoma by the end of December, and we have expanded that into Oklahoma. We have 2 ambassadors coming from Oklahoma for this next training, so that's really exciting, and I'll tell you why. We were also selected to participate in the DOE Code Compliance Project, which has enabled us to, is enabling us to go out and evaluate some of the building practices and focus our training. We're really excited about the data collection and the sampling that's going to happen, so that sampling will help us to identify what areas of code builders and contractors are having the most trouble with, and then be able to, really target our training in focused areas to be able to move that mark forward. And it's interesting that no matter who you ask, you get a different answer about who's doing what right and wrong. So having that data is going to be huge. Next slide. So the 3 needs to improve. Initiating energy code working groups across the region, I should say, not just the state, but education and training, set up and go through working groups. Sometimes they're already existing with an ICC chapter or a building group, builders group, or contractors groups like the air conditioning contractors. So wherever we can, we're going to try and initiate that training into those areas. And we're developing curriculum to deliver on really the information, like I said, that'll be targeted toward code-compliant building practices and making that available to all building industry stakeholders. We're actually doing that outreach and presenting that curriculum and other curriculum out through our ambassadors. So that's the reason we want this army of ambassadors, is we're giving them advanced training, so then they will be able to be the trainers in each of the local areas and have an even better understanding, so that they can do the peer-to-peer assistance and answer questions. Then the questions that they need help with, or the resources that they need, they'll come back to us for that. In addition to their speaking out into the local areas, we're going to have a series of webinars and presentations that will be provided to local areas that are, again, interactive. Instead of doing region or statewide webinars, we're going to do local webinars at different times so that they can talk to each other and help to network from their desk. We're also developing a speakers bureau, which will be a list of existing resources that will help to expand beyond our curriculum and beyond our information and resources. And that will be anybody from our stakeholders groups that have new technologies. Somebody mentioned performance testing. One of our partners is the Texas Home Energy Raiders group, and they have a fabulous training that they do for blower door and duct blasters. And so tapping into all those folks that already have training, and the Air Conditioners Association, the insulation manufacturers, all have their own training with CEUs attached that we'll be able to put together a whole list, a menu, if you will, and then those ambassadors and those local groups, as they get organized, will be able to tap us as a resource. Next. Our lesson learned is largely, the biggest lesson that everybody's learned is that there is a 3 or 4 year lag in local jurisdictions adopting and enforcing a state code. And that is huge, because we kept talking initially about, yes, we need to advance and adopt a new code, but the fact of the matter is, the more we dug into it, the more we realized that there was this huge need for bringing up the rear, and kind of leveling that playing field. And because enforcement's on a local level, we actually have to get every local jurisdiction to support what we're doing. And so, and really enforce it and staff it, and as Maria said, finding enough building code officials who are not only talented and certified and knowledgeable, but even available to fill those slots. We have over 1,200 jurisdictions that can adopt codes, and so that's a very big reach. So we're working on that, and we're really trying to increase compliance with the existing code for right now, which in Texas is the 2009. And if we are seeing movement towards 2012 on a voluntary basis by a number of cities. I think we have about 65 that have been identified so far that have gone ahead with 2012 or similar codes. And so we think that the market will eventually move itself in that direction as we bring up information and education.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, and then I have Oklahoma.
Oh, yep.
Our newest, one more slide, our newest established compliance collaborative had our first meeting in September, and it was fabulous. We had about 25, 30 people participate, and there we have the support of the ODEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, the Oklahoma Department of Commerce, the Energy Secretary, the Builders Association, several cities, lots of code officials, lots of builders, and they're all wanting to move forward with energy codes, and yet they have a barrier. And without getting into big details, they do have, like I said, all this support for both residential and commercial codes. They have adopted the codes. They have identified funding for code training and also for regulating energy code inspectors. But the barrier there is an interpretation by their Attorney General. And so we are working with the stakeholders, and I did not put this in writing because I don't want it to bite me. But we're going into the legislative session. We're working with stakeholders to try to eliminate that barrier and clarify the authorization so that we can go ahead with implementation and enforcement in the local areas under the existing law. So as we do that, I'll keep you posted and let you know, but it will be a small housekeeping bill that clarifies a few words that will be able to, like, stop the dam, and hopefully we'll have all these folks that are just chomping at the bit to get started will be out in the field and working on energy codes.
Great. Okay, thanks so much, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're going to move on to our discussion period. So if you If you have a question, feel free to hit *6 to unmute your phone. And Kamaria, do you have any questions that you want to lead us off with there?
Sure. Jim Myers had a question. I believe it was for Idaho. He asked if anyone was looking at the new BPI IDL program for duct and envelope testing.
Yeah, this is Sharon. I believe that's one of them that the circuit rider is looking at, and specifically our circuit rider is developing the training around air sealing. Is that a highly recommended one by everyone to focus on?
This is Jim. Yeah, air sealing is always important. Where I was going from is I know the work in the southeast that Southface did with their DET, duct and envelope tightness testing, and then it was deployed in Georgia, and then it was deployed in the Midwest. I can't remember where, if it was Indiana or Ohio, someplace in the Midwest. So BPI has just recently released their new protocol, which sounds very similar to DET, called IDL, and it provides certifications for individuals. It could be builders, could be HVAC professionals that could perform those level of testing, where one of the speakers today said when you get into rural areas, it's a challenge because you don't have those resources. So it wouldn't be there to replace your raters or BPI professionals that you have in the larger communities, but in the more rural communities or where you don't have the infrastructure to perform those diagnostic tests for the residential code provisions.
This is Pete Burns out of Minneapolis. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, just a quick comment on the new BPI certification. There's no training component to that new certification. It's just strictly a test that gains you a certificate. So that was one of our concerns with it, that you'd probably need some kind of a DET training just to pass it, unless you had actual field experience doing blower door and duct blast testing.
Okay. Should we move on here? Kamaria, are there any other questions there?
No, I didn't have any other questions during the presentations
Okay.
that weren't already answered.
Okay. I had a question for New Hampshire for Autumn. I'm wondering how your collaborative decided on focusing on the one task of building labeling when you were talking about code compliance. What was the thought process there as far as how the building labeling is going to relate to improved code compliance?
Well, I think our general consensus as a group was we needed more outreach and education for everyone. It was sort of a theme that came up within our compliance roadmap in multiple chapters with multiple sort of stakeholder groups. And we thought one nice way of sort of raising awareness of energy codes and energy use sort of more generally would be the building energy labeling sort of process and program. And I honestly don't recall the moment that we sort of decided to move forward with this specific idea, but I do know that it has come up in multiple meetings, how we plan to sort of loop back the building labeling effort to increase code awareness and compliance. And I think the general thought was our efforts are going to be primarily on new construction, but we don't want to forget about existing building stock, considering that's a very large portion of the New Hampshire building stock. But given that we are a code collaborative, we'd like to sort of look at the building labeling programs that help new construction, and we would figure whatever sort of label that we would like to have, I think we'd like to be able to tie it to the code. So maybe not just comparing it to, the house next door if you're in a development, but comparing it to the energy code. So it would be like you're doing, so much better than code, or the house isn't quite there, something along those lines. So it's definitely been a challenge on that sort of whole thought process on how we can, really relate it back to the code so that we are sort of meeting our goal as an energy code collaborative and not just as an entity trying to label buildings. But I think we'll find a path that's appropriate for New Hampshire.
That's great, Autumn. It's been really great to hear how you guys are moving forward and working through all these barriers. But tying that to the MLS and getting it out there so that it's more of a miles per gallon, awareness kind of campaign almost is going to be really an interesting pilot to try, and maybe we'll be leading other states eventually after a certain number of years. So good job with that.
We would love to be that leader, but we're sort of just ticking off that process along with Vermont. So hopefully we'll have even more good things to report on at our next all collaborative meeting, and along the way back to you, Maria.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, does anyone else have any questions for anybody else at this point?
Hi, this is Sharon. I just want to comment on New Hampshire that I think it sounds great, and I look forward to following it. Wanted to mention something that would piggyback off of that, and one of our local utilities has something called My Account, and you can plug in your energy usage information and a bunch of other data, and we're currently in negotiation with them to try to get them to benchmark that against current energy code, so that somebody could plug in the data and not just see a breakdown of their energy use, and they would also see, here's how I compare to a current energy code. And I'm not sure where that's going to go, so I can't really list it as an accomplishment yet, but I'd love to see a tie-in between a labeling program for homes as well as, somebody with major outreach like the utility, getting that kind of benchmarking going that would be similar to the labeling program.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Sharon. Maybe that's something you and Autumn should talk about on the side, or if you're interested in looking into that further, Autumn.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I'm assuming we'll have. Is there a slide with contact information, Maria, or could you hand me off to?
Sure, I'll get you in touch with each other afterwards. Although your emails are in that, in the big email that we sent out with the agenda, and that you can find each other's emails. But I'll send a separate one just to introduce you guys.
Excellent, thank you.
Your contact info. Okay, does anybody else have any other comments or questions for anyone else? Okay. I think unless somebody's muted, we don't have any more questions. So if you were trying to ask a question and I'm not responding, it's because you're on mute, so unmute yourself and you can ask it still. But okay, so we're pretty close to 4 o'clock, so we're actually on time. I thought maybe we wouldn't need the full 2 hours, but it looks like we're pretty close to it. Oh,
thank you, Maria.
Did someone just unmute themselves? Okay, all right. So I was just going to say just some quick summary takeaways from what I heard on this meeting, and feel free to add yours. It seems like leadership is key to these collaboratives, and especially engaging one lead person to be in charge of following up with others, and that committees work well for that, and having one lead person be on top of the committees and following up with committees, and that's a really, really key part of making these collaboratives successful. In addition, relationships are key. I noticed in Nebraska, Danielle said that they wanted to engage utilities, which are especially hard to engage because they're not under an energy efficiency resource standard, so they started attending the meetings held by utilities to build those relationships, so that, again, the relationships are key to getting this, to having success with your collaboratives. And also, it's interesting to note that after, all these collaborative meetings have been held, and there have been so many people in all of these different states meeting and talking about this stuff, that a lot of the states that are on the phone here have adopted the 2012 or are looking to adopt the 2012 and moving forward. So it seems that certainly, at least if nothing else, there's some anecdotal evidence that getting people at the table and talking and understanding each other's positions are helping to foster greater understanding and appreciation for energy codes, which ultimately is leading to, what we all want here is in the adoption and compliance of those codes, or at least the adoption. Compliance, we all know that we have a lot more work to do. And that some of the challenges people are facing is obviously funding across the board. And in Pennsylvania and in other places, I know getting contractors involved in this process has been a struggle. And having a champion, which again goes back to needing leaders. And if we don't have leaders, then that's what we need. We need the champions at the local level. That's a tough one to overcome. Thankfully, at least you guys are there and helping to help identify and find those. Some new ideas that I heard was promoting energy code training through AIA and other associations, compliance study using university students to lower the cost and to also start engaging universities in this issue, building energy labeling to raise awareness and demand for energy efficiency buildings and codes. And in Texas, interesting that you're going to be doing local webinars and have a speakers bureau, which is really setting there for success. So good job, everyone. Keep up the good work. Thank you for attending the webinar today. And do we have any last or questions? Okay, hearing none, happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and we'll send out follow-up information soon.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.